California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Paul Zellerbach. He is the district attorney for Riverside County. Later on in the program, we'll be speaking with Sniff. He is the sheriff for Riverside County. And in both segments, we'll be talking about the propositions on the November election ballot. And I want to start with you, sir, on Proposition 36. That was the initiative to reform three strikes.
Correct.
It passed overwhelmingly, almost 70% of the vote. And let us remember, maybe 6 years ago, three strikes reform died. It did not pass by even a stretch of the imagination.
Correct.
What happened in 6 years?
A financial crisis hit the state of California, and I think that made people rethink a lot of public safety issues and positions that they'd previously held. Those views or attitudes changed somewhat.
So under three strikes reform, the third strike needs to be one in which the perpetrator committed a violent or serious act. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what do you think of this? Did you take a position, sir?
Yeah, I took a position. I was opposed to the initiative because what it does, I think three strikes was a good tool for prosecutors to utilize in appropriate, limited circumstances or situations.
There were some DAs that took the opposite side. You know that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so that's interesting. The DA Association did not take a position?
The DAs Association did take a position.
Which was?
Which was opposed to the initiative. But certain, like as you pointed out, Brad, certain DAs, like LA DA Steve Cooley, he refused to enforce the three strikes law in its current form.
A Republican, a conservative?
You bet, and supported the current proposition.
Right, so why do you think in the end you had a 70% support for Prop 36? That's not close. That's an absolute repudiation.
No, that's a mandate from the public, no question. And again, I think that people saw the financial aspect of it and
if you think about it, you know as well as anyone, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that our state prisons are being operated in an unconstitutional manner and are requiring that we release prisoners, and so or decrease our prison population.
They didn't mandate they released it, but they
decrease our prison population.
Correct.
So is this not one way to kind of get a hold of the prison overcrowding problem?
Well, not really, because less than 5% of all the state prisoners housed in the facilities are third strikers that fall within Proposition 36.
Any drop is better. I mean,
well, one can argue that, but keep in mind that these third strikers, even though the third offense was a minimal offense, felony offense, they've had 2 prior serious or violent convictions in the past, so they're not good people.
It's not easy. No, it's not easy. Let's talk about Prop 34, if we may, and that is the death penalty initiative.
Correct.
Several states have outlawed the death penalty. What's interesting about California, as blue as we are, voting 60% for Barack Obama, the state still voted to uphold the death penalty, although it was closer than many expected. 52% voted no. That's close.
Correct.
That's close.
It is close.
And what do you make of California's view on the death penalty?
Well, I was a statewide co-chair against Proposition 34. As both a prosecutor and as a Superior Court judge, I prosecuted death penalty cases, and as a judge, I sentenced people to death in cases.
Yet what's interesting, and I asked you this before we started, you became a prosecutor when?
In 1978.
You became a judge when?
2000.
So how many people that you either prosecuted or sentenced have been executed?
No one.
No one. It's got to be very frustrating for you.
Well, it is.
Not that death is something is a virtue, but you know what I'm getting at.
Exactly, but I think it's more frustrating for the victims' families and friends.
But I think that's why 48% of Californians said enough is enough.
Well, the big thing with that initiative was mend it, don't end it.
Right.
And I'm meeting with the Supreme Court Justice up in San Francisco with some other prosecutors next week.
I mean, she has been very clear that, well, I shouldn't say that she's been very clear. She has suggested that she has some serious problems with the death penalty in California.
And so do I. But I think we can do things to make it, if you're going to have a law, I don't care what that law is, we should carry it out. And we're not carrying out the death penalty for many political reasons in California.
But is it also that California doesn't control its own destiny vis-a-vis the death penalty because so many cases get appealed to the federal system, and as a result, they got caught up in federal courts, and California can't do anything?
That's part of the problem.
Okay.
But I think there can be a solution in that regard as well.
But that means we have to talk to our federal officials, no?
Correct.
And
Correct.
Is there a will to do that?
Well, I think with this mandate from the California voters, I think there is a will to do that.
Okay, I want to shift gears and talk about Proposition 30. Most folks were focused on the education element of Prop 30. Of course, Prop 30 increased sales tax by 1/4 cent for 4 years, taxes on the wealthy for 7 years. Before we talk about its passage, I was shocked. I never thought it would pass, and it passed with 55% of the vote. Feel free to comment on its passage.
Well, the California DA's Association took a position in support of the proposition.
What about Mr. Zellerbach?
Mr. Zellerbach did not support it.
Did not. Boy, you're just coming out against your association, left, right, and center.
You know, I'm a man of principle, and it's not that I didn't agree that the state needed more revenue.
Right.
The fact remains, I'm sorry, but based upon what I've seen in Sacramento, and as I've explained to the governor in person, that money, the legislature still can do what they want with that money.
There's no lockbox.
There's no
as
lockbox.
Al Gore would say.
And I don't trust them to a certain extent.
But let's mention the public safety element. Yes, a significant chunk of that money goes to education. But as I understand it, there's now a constitutional guarantee of money being sent to the counties for the realignment, as we know that now lower level offenders are going from state prison to county jails.
And that's why the State DA's Association did support the initiative, because a certain percentage is going to go for realignment purposes or costs.
So in the final analysis, even though you opposed it, are you kind of breathing a bit of a sigh of relief?
No, because realignment is the governor's brainchild.
Right, but it's here.
And he's committed
here.
to it, so I was of the mindset that the governor would have found a way to properly fund it, because he wants that program to be successful statewide.
Right. Well, let's talk about the relative success or failure of that program. Right. I've spoken with several DAs and sheriffs, and honestly, sir, I'm getting differing verdicts on realignment. You know, some are just violently opposed to it. Others are more willing to look into it, give it some more time. I think I know where you stand. Talk to us about it.
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Oh, that's a change.
Well,
it's a change. I thought you'd be more strongly opposed.
No, there are certain aspects of realignment that I think are good and appropriate and well-intentioned, and I think can help the recidivism rate in the state of California. But there are other aspects that I think are draconian and present a risk to public safety.
So let's focus on the net positives.
Okay.
What have you seen? It's been over a year now to suggest that some of the net positives are actually there.
I think these people that are getting released from prison, the 3 nons, as we characterize them.
Non-sexual, non-violent, non-serious.
Correct. Those individuals, when they get released from prison, rather than being supervised by a state parole officer, are now being supervised by local Riverside County probation officers. It's more hands-on.
Right.
There's more structure. There's more programs available to them.
And they're serving time in their own communities. They're not being sent away, I presume.
As far as the new offenses, those people will be serving they'll be serving their prison sentence in local county jail. But again,
in their own county?
In their own county.
So families close by hopefully can help with readjusting.
But the problem is, one of the unintended consequences is some of these people are serving 15 and 20-year prison sentences in their local county jails.
Because of enhancements. No, I've heard that, and that is distressing for many.
Correct.
The negatives. Relative negatives.
The negatives in Riverside County is we only have 3,900 jail beds in Riverside County. Now, 26% of our jail population are sentenced prisoners who would have otherwise gone to state prison. Because we have to now house them in Riverside County, the sheriff, since January of this year, has had to release over 6,000 defendants early.
So are they being monitored?
No, nothing. They're just released from custody, sent back out into the public.
So one would hope, if they're non-sexual, non-violent, non-serious, that they won't reoffend, but there are risks.
Well, it's only the current case that's non-sexual, non-serious, or non-violent. They can have serious violent prior convictions in their past and still qualify for release under realignment.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think we modify it. I think we tweak it. I, with Senator Bill Emerson earlier this year, sponsored a bill that would limit up to 3 years the term that someone could serve in local county jail.
And what happened with that?
I had the votes initially, and then a couple of
You need to go back.
I need to go back.
You need to go back. Okay, his name is Paul Zellerbach. He is the DA in Riverside County. When we come back, we'll be speaking with his colleague, Stan Sniff, the sheriff of Riverside County. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
At its peak, California housed how many prisoners? 156,000, 167,000, 173,000, or 197,000? In 2006, California was housing 173,000 prisoners in a system built for 80,000.
This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest is Stan Sniff. Mr. Sniff is the sheriff for Riverside County. And so I'd like to speak about 4 propositions that recently passed or didn't and their impact on law enforcement. And I'd like to start with Proposition 30, which really was focused more upon education, but an element of the tax increases do go towards prison realignment. And as we know, under prison realignment, the counties are taking more of the incarcerated. So talk to us about Prop 30.
Well, it ends up being something that the statewide, the sheriffs were very strongly in support of. As you know, and we'd had prior discussions on this, part of that was a guarantee of funding that was going to be very volatile from year to year with the legislature. Excuse me. But so we were all very hopeful that was going to happen. It was tied by the governor to the educational bill on that. But what that does is it stabilizes for California's law enforcement, absorbing a lot of the impact on AB 109.
Does Proposition 30 include a constitutional guarantee of funding for realignment, or is it simply setting aside funds for out years for the realignment plan?
The intent of it was to give a constitutional guarantee. However, the exact mix of money is still left up in the air, dealing with the governor on it. But it does give a platform. As I've indicated before to a number of groups, it does not cover, the amount of money does not cover all our needs, but having that as opposed to zero is a significant event.
I have to ask you, were you surprised it passed? Because I've said before,
Yes.
I was very surprised.
Yes.
I didn't think it was going to pass, and it passed pretty handily, 55%.
Yes.
What happened? What went right? Was it the sheriff's endorsement?
Well, I think the sheriffs did support it, but I think there was a lot in the conservative arena that did not want that to go through.
Right.
But it just seemed that there were in these elections, a lot of changes in demographics had come through that we've now reflecting across in California.
More progressive electorate, at least in California.
And I think the education issue has resonated with a lot of folks up and down. I mean, that's the future of our country, the future of our state.
Let's shift gears, if we may, and speak about Proposition 36. That is 3 strikes reform. And what that proposition does, and it passed, is for the third strike needs to be a more serious offense for the 3 strikes penalty to kick in. A few years ago, there was an attempt at 3 strikes reform. It went down in flames. This proposition passed with overwhelming majorities. Why, you think?
Well, I think fundamentally, that has been a discussion item out in the communities for quite a while now, ever since the election concluded. But I think a lot of us collectively have seen the costs soar for local law enforcement. The impact has been negative on local law enforcement. There's no argument in the law enforcement community that 3 strikes has been a good item as far as making our state safer. The downside has been the state has not come along and matched it with spending on prisons and the rest. And a lot of new bills come out every year that criminalize actions or actually increase the sanctions.
Right. I mean,
and so we've not paid our way, and now we're paying a dear price with AB 109 on the realignment.
And let's not forget the U.S. Supreme Court called California state prisons unconstitutional in their effectuation of prison time. So there's no doubt we saw some real concerns coming out of the federal courts, and we had to get a handle on that.
Well, exactly, and that mirrored exactly what the courts did on California, the federal courts, the Supreme Court did to California, was drive home the point that you're overcrowded because you have not built the infrastructure in the prisons to support what you've done in that state.
Yet at the same time, the voters overwhelmingly passed Prop 35, which is increasing penalties for human trafficking. Now look, that feels very good, sir, that we increase penalties on human traffickers. But wow, we're just going back at it again. More penalties means more people in prison for a longer time. We love to throw away the bad guys, but we don't have the prison space. You just said that.
Yeah, we don't have the prison space or the local jail space, and it's costing us at the local level a lot of additional dollars to be spent. But I think that captured a lot of attention with the public and resonated because of all the stories of particularly young girls who have been captured and picked up and trafficked, particularly in the sex trade, and that's been a common story in a lot of local papers.
But look, when we legislate and increase prison sentences by initiative, look, legislators love to be able to say, I passed a bill to increase prison time, and voters love it even more to say, I was part of that team. We don't have the jail space, and I'm just concerned that it's so easy to jump on this bandwagon. And Prop 35, again, it felt good, but I really question whether it was the right move at this time with the U.S. Supreme Court ordering us to release prisoners.
Yeah, and to follow along with that, I think for many of us in the criminal justice system and the public at large, we're going to be very, very concerned about if the state does not continue to increase jail capacity and prison capacity, we'll be facing another AB 109 realignment round 2 in a few years.
And I want to get your sense on that issue. As you know, the Democrats had a very good day, election November 2012. In the state, we saw the state assembly and state senate go 2/3. And that means the Democrats can really do what they choose because they have a supermajority. They could even override a veto of a Democratic governor.
Right.
Democrats haven't been known for supporting an expansion of jails. So are you concerned that we can continue to see the Democrats trying to show, oh, they're tough on crime, but yet not give the counties and state more prison space?
Well, I hope that doesn't end up being the case. I think all of us hope dearly that regardless of which partisan group is in power, that some type of semblance of balance is achieved. I mean, they're going to have to track not only what they want, because some things do need to have criminal sanctions increased, but I think there needs to be a lot more self-discipline. But on the corresponding side, the costs for what those impact our communities at jail and prisons and so on, that has to be part of the balance in that system.
I want to shift and speak about Prop 34, which was the initiative to eliminate the death penalty. California has shown its progressive stripes time and time again, but yet on the death penalty, California, as blue as it is, does seem to come out strongly in favor of supporting a death penalty, and they did it again. Proposition 34 failed. It wasn't a massacre, but it did go down. I think it garnered about 46% of the vote. Were you surprised by that, sir?
Well, there's been a lot of anecdotal stories, as you well know, in the media about folks that are innocent, that have been convicted, or their case falls apart at some later date. The DNA is playing an increased role right now as far as making those cases a little bit more solid. But I think all of us are very much concerned about innocent people potentially being convicted, and in this case being executed. So I think that on the human side, on the heart side, kind of tugs at everybody. I think the electorate made a wonderful decision, even though it's changed as far as the percentages on that. There still is a responsibility all of us have in the criminal justice system to support those areas where you have people that are wantonly, particularly serial murderers, child murderers, people in custody.
But here's the challenge.
So I think the role for the death penalty is still there.
But here's the challenge. Someone on death row is more likely to die of natural causes in California than be executed. And the cost to keep someone on death row is so much greater than if they were part of a general prison population.
Yeah, but I think most of us understand that that's really driven by the court processes that surely could be streamlined quite a bit. It's ridiculous that those appeals go on for 20 and 25 years. And although you want to balance with making sure you're executing the right person, there's that extreme right now which turns the whole thing on its head and makes it almost, even though we say we have a death penalty, it's not really being utilized in the state for those very reasons.
So can the Sheriff's Association, the DA's Association, do something to convince Sacramento to streamline this process or make this process more safe, more fair, whatever it is, so that the state is not spending so much money on an individual who ultimately dies in prison and is not executed?
Well, precisely on that point, I think you're going to see the sheriffs and the district attorneys in the state and the others that are part of the criminal justice system push toward that. You know, ultimately that ends up being resolved by public opinion, but I think you're going to see us carrying that charge forward.
So as we conclude, crime continues to drop despite a tough economy. Why?
Well, that's true in probably a gross sense. But if you saw the latest victimization studies that are coming out nationwide, and you've got to remember the FBI Part 1 crimes, those things that are reported, and typically only half of violent crime is reported and maybe a third of property
But take
crime.
some credit.
Well, we are, but you got to remember that the numbers that come out are old numbers. They're from the previous year. So you're kind of driving down the road by looking in your rearview mirror.
Okay.
But we are seeing patterns, particularly in our county and some of the other communities in California, where although the overall numbers for a jurisdiction may drop, you are actually seeing surges of it going up in some areas.
We need to stay safe. His name is Stan Sniff, Sheriff of Riverside County. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
According to the Bureau of Federal Statistics, which state maintains the largest prison population? California, Florida, New York, or Texas? As of the summer of 2012, Texas maintained the largest prison population at 154,000.
This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Adam Rush, he is a member of the City Council in Eastvale, one of the newest cities in the state of California. There are actually 4 new cities, relatively speaking, all 4 in Riverside County, and all 4 have suffered dramatically under a taxing scheme that ultimately took money away from just these 4 new cities. Could you explain that before we talk about the recent permutations?
Yeah, well, these are the only 4 cities in the state. And what the governor did with the Democratic legislator about a year and a half ago was take away our vehicle license fees. So when you pay your vehicle license registration, it's supposed to go back to all the cities. Well, new cities get a bigger pot of that because we're new and we're trying to start up. They took that away from us in 2010, and we've been fighting ever since to get that back, and it's been detrimental to some of those cities.
And what's interesting is the legislature passed a fix, and I don't know, I thought it seemed like a simple fix, that there would be no reason for the governor to veto it. I'm not taking a position, but it just seemed like, okay, it's passed and it's going to be fixed. But the governor did veto.
He did.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Were you, sir?
We were appalled.
But not so, aside from being appalled, were you surprised?
With the logistics of it, we were surprised.
You were surprised he vetoed?
Yeah, it was $14 million out of the budget, which is billions.
Right.
And with the $54 million being, stuck away in the Parks Department, the math just did not make sense for him to veto it.
Well, what happened? I mean, California League of Cities blew it again, or what happened?
I think, the league has been fighting on the lawsuit, but,
Well, let's talk about the lawsuit in a second, but...
We've been working with, our lobbyists and ourselves to get the manpower up there. California Association of Counties is unfortunately a bigger dog in the fight than the cities are. They have more elected officials and more gravitas to put up there at the governor's
And so
level.
are what you're saying that the $14 million there then therefore goes to the counties and not the city?
It goes to the counties like you had talked about with the sheriff earlier for realignment.
Right.
And that was a financial concern. But again, it's, in our opinion, it's a drop in the overall bucket of billions and billions of dollars.
Okay, you mentioned a lawsuit. The league did file a lawsuit.
Yes.
Where does that lawsuit stand today?
That lawsuit's currently pending a decision. So we're waiting for, we think the arguments went in our favor, but we don't have an official opinion from the court yet. And if that goes in our favor, it's likely to be appealed. So there's not going to be an immediate fix to that.
Does Prop 30 impact the lawsuit or the arguments that you are presenting?
Well, it didn't impact the arguments that we presented originally because it was before that passed. I don't think Prop 30 is going to, I've had this question several times, help us. It may hurt us because it may prevent people from going out there and buying more and spending more tax money. I don't think it's going to be a benefit. I don't think we're seeing any of that money.
So let's talk more broadly then about the 4 cities. I have read, I understand that Eastvale is doing all right even without the money.
Yes.
But your friends in Jurupa Valley, do you actually border Jurupa Valley?
We do. We're neighbors.
That city's in serious shape.
It is.
We could see a disincorporation, which we haven't seen for decades. Explain why Eastvale is managing to weather this storm, but a city like Jurupa Valley is really in dire straits.
Sure. Well, I think it has to do primarily with demographics and location. Eastvale is bordered by 3 freeways. We have a lot of commerce that comes in and out of our city, and we have the tax base and the revenue base to be able to do the improvements for residents to move to the city, which creates a safer city, and for more businesses to come to the city. Our sales tax has shot up relative to those other cities. Jurupa is a larger area, and it's an older community, more equestrian. So it's a different type of individual, not a lot of, not a lot of higher income families that have children that want to move to that area. It's more retirees on fixed incomes.
But I think you're being a bit humble in terms of how well Eastvale is doing, because as I understand it, I mean, you have retailers flocking into Eastvale.
We do.
Give us a sense.
Yeah. We are really in a little bit of an economic boom in Eastvale with respect to our retail. We're trying to broaden that base. I think it has to do with location. I mean, you've heard the cliche location.
Of course.
We have good freeway access, and we have individuals in our community that work very hard, and so they like to go out and enjoy.
But is it the incorporation that created the environment for Home Goods, Jersey Mike's, Mountain View Tires? I mean, it goes on and on.
Absolutely.
Why weren't they flocking in before incorporation?
We've taken a real sense of pride in growing our community. We're going out there in the business community, in the retail community with our chamber, and we're attracting these businesses.
How are you able to attract them when you don't have tools like, for example, redevelopment? Because what's the argument?
Yeah, it's really come down to sweat equity. We're going out there, we're pounding the pavement, we're saying, come to Eastvale. We're working with the business owners and the owners of the retail shops to get them the best deal possible. You're right, we don't have a lot of tools. We can't, cut sales tax to a certain extent because that would hurt us. We don't have redevelopment to do facade improvements, things of that nature. We just have, the same sense of come, we'll give you the best deal possible, and we'll be your friend in this. We're not going to stick you in a bureaucratic process. It's really cutting the red tape as much as we can.
And as we know now, that has resulted in a serious spike in sales tax revenue.
Yes.
Give us a sense.
Yes. Well, we've exceeded expectations about 24%, and that was just third quarter.
24%.
24%.
That's
from
a
last year.
huge spike.
And we're looking to see what the increase is from the holiday season. Last year we did pretty good. My family went out on Black Friday and it was a bit crazy.
Of course
so we're
it was.
hoping to see a big spike there. And it really is just, we have a lot of those retail services that people like. We have the Best Buy and the Target and the Kohl's and the food.
In a strange way, in a perverse way, does this hurt your argument to have the VLF restored?
If you look at it from the perspective of, do we need that to keep incorporating, it may. But that's not the argument we're going in with. The state passed legislation in 2004 promising this money to Eastvale and to new cities. We're asking the state to just live up to that promise. Right. This is the money that we are allocated for our public safety services, and we don't want public safety to suffer.
Do you have your own police department?
No,
or are you
we
contracting
don't.
out?
We're contracting with the sheriff's department.
And are the other 3 cities as well
Yes.
contracting out?
Yes.
So is the problem therefore that you can't pay the county for the sheriff's services because you don't have those public safety dollars?
It's not necessarily paying them, it's how much can we increase. And right now we're really down to the bare bones as far as making sure that we have those ratios of public safety officers to residents. We would like to expand, we would like to increase DUI checkpoints and traffic control measures, and traffic around schools is always crazy. Those are still some of the complaints, and we're still constrained in that respect.
So as we head into a new legislative year, are there efforts to bring back a version of the VLF restoration?
Yes.
What does that look like? How do you get a version out that the governor will sign?
Well, AB 1090 had everybody support except the California Association of Counties, CSAC.
Okay.
They have a new executive director. We're doing what we can within our framework to alleviate their concerns. We think their concerns are unfounded, but like I said, they're a big shark in the little pond that is Sacramento politics, and we have to do as much as we can to alleviate their concerns before we're even going to think about new legislation.
I'm wondering if now that Riverside County, I can't believe I'm saying this, is represented by Democrats left, right, and center in Sacramento, who would have thunk that would have happened? Will that help your case? You have Richard Roth in the state Senate, Jose Medina. Are those your 2 members? Richard Roth?
Richard Roth and Eric Linder.
Eric Linder's a Republican member, but you would hope that wouldn't matter. But look, you now have, there's only 40 senators. You now have 1.
True.
Richard Roth, a Democrat, considered fairly moderate and probably able to work with both sides. Will that help your case?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't want to prejudge them. I haven't met either of them after their elections yet. So we'll see. I think our concern is that the grand scope of what the state wants to do on a statewide scheme with the high-speed rail and with new legislation on the state level and with the whole global warming mitigation and all of that.
There's a lot out
We're
there.
going to get lost in the shuffle, and that's what we have to continue to fight for.
Go talk to Senator Richard Roth. I mean, I'm sure he wants to help some of his constituents, especially new ones like you.
We hope.
Okay, his name is Adam Rush. He is a member of the City Council in Eastvale, one of the newest cities in Riverside County. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.